Alright, we should now be streaming it. Will take a little while, there'll just be a slight delay and then we'll be on. Okay, so by now you've all at least come across React and you've begun working with it in your projects. So could anyone just explain to me maybe what React is or why we're using it in this case? Okay, so you're saying that it's a reactive library, as in that it reacts to changes in your application, so you don't have to refresh the whole of the DOM each time, something like that? Yep, so that's obviously one advantage of it, yeah. Why do we tend to use it? What's it designed for, or what's it good for?
Well, you don't need any extra programs installed in the computer to run a dynamic web page.
So it's quite lightweight, that's definitely an advantage of it. You don't need that many extra dependencies, yeah, compared to something like Angular, which is a full framework to help us build our application. Yep, then React is quite lightweight, so there's that advantage. But why we mainly use it is just to design the user interfaces and the user experiences of web pages, yeah, that's what it's designed for. It's a view library to design the view parts of our application. Yeah, if you're used to bigger frameworks like model view controller frameworks, then it's specifically the V in MVC. Yeah, it's designed for the views and the user interfaces and the user interactions. Yeah, so it's designed for that, and it's very lightweight. Yep, and it's reactive, and it's also component based as well. So that means we can write smaller files that are easier to update and easier to maintain. So if something goes wrong in our application, hopefully we've broken it up into lots of different modules, lots of different components, and we'll be able to debug where that error is in one of our components rather than having just a huge file. Yeah, so it's a component-based library as well. You requested to go through the setup again, so you weren't too sure how we set up our React application. Now, there is a additional npm module called create react app, and that's what we used. So we installed that via the terminal, and we ran the command npm install create react app, and all that does is that creates, and we used a global, so we install it to our machine so that we can use it from the command line. So that's all the global is doing in this case. We'd be able to use create react app from the command line, just the same way that we use git from the command line. Yeah. If we didn't have that G there, we'd only have it local to a certain project. So yeah, if I'm installing it globally, it doesn't matter what current folder I'm in. So that's okay. So that's just, yep, so you might have got that error as well, yeah? So if you did get that error, guys, then you don't have permission to install that directly to your machine. So you need to use a sudo or something like that, yeah? You have to give yourself super user privileges to authorize the installation of that. So that was the first command we ran. So that's just installed some files on our machine that allow us to skeleton out a React app. It's a common way used now. We can just include a script tag and include React in that as well. If you go to the React webpage, then they'll tell you other ways that you might be able to use React in your project. If we're using it for a large part of the project, then it makes sense to use the create React app, which is why we used it. Then we navigated to wherever we wanted to install our new project to create the file structure of our new project. So in this case, I'm just going to put mine on the desktop. And then we ran the command create react app using our newly installed files, and we just gave it a name, whatever the name of our project is. So for example, you used CodeFlix. That's obviously already been used on my computer, so I'll just call it CodeFlix Workshop just for now, so I can tell the difference, yeah? I'll put test as well. So when you run that, it probably took quite a long time, and also with the naming restrictions, you can only use lowercase letters for the name of your React project. So if you see that error, that's why you get that error as well. That takes a little while to install because it is quite a lot of files. And then I will open it up in a second once it has installed and we can have a look at the file structure. But essentially it's the file structure that you are used to and you've been working with for the past couple of days. Yeah, so you've been mainly working in the source folder and inside the app.js file. Yeah, that's where you've been making most of your changes. So yeah, other things we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about the way you've been writing code. So you've actually been using JSX. So again, if you installed React in a different way or you used React in a different way in your project, you wouldn't necessarily be able to write in JSX out of the box. But Create React App, it bundles up quite a lot of other dependencies. So you've got things like Babel in B-A-B-E-L, yeah? You've got things like that in Create React App. And that allows you to use modern syntax, it allows you to use JSX, and it also bundles things with Webpack as well, so that when you create your project, then it bundles it all together into some static files for you, and you don't really have to worry about all the configuration and setting up, which can be a pain sometimes and can take a long time. So we just want to get straight into writing the code and designing our app. So Create React App lets us do that. It lets us put the design at the forefront and not have to worry too much about configuration and setup. So that's mainly why we're using it. Yep, so then if I navigate, in fact if I just open that folder on my desktop now, I'll show you the file structure that gets created. So this is what Create React App has created for us. So it's created all of these files, yeah? We've got some node modules, we've got a source folder, and we got these as well, a getignore, a package.json, all these files. These are only there because of Create React App. Yeah, this is a recommended file structure for when you're building a React project. So if you look at something like this, you can see that already it has installed for us the npm module of React and React DOM and React scripts. So usually you'd have to install all these independently, you'd have to make sure they're all working together. It's also installed some testing suite for us, a build suite to build our application and things like that. So otherwise we would have to set this all up manually, and this is just a lot easier and quicker way. Yeah, that's why we're using Create React App. Is that making a little bit more sense, Abdul? Yeah, why we're using it? Yeah, so it still creates a HTML page for us. It still creates index.html. So that's where our whole app is getting rendered inside. It's getting rendered inside the root div on our HTML page. And app.js is the main file that is getting exported into our index.html. Yeah? And it's doing that via this file here. So our app is getting rendered in our web page inside of the root element. Yeah. So all that's been set up for us. Otherwise we'd have to do it ourselves, and it's a bit tricky, right? That you could make a lot of errors in that stage, and then suddenly you've gone from having a lot of code to absolutely nothing works because you haven't configured it correctly. So yeah, it just takes the headache away from things and we can concentrate on development. So that being said, let's concentrate a bit more on the development now. And I mentioned earlier that React was a component-based library, yeah, so it allows us to create various components. And I think so far most of you have only just been working inside the one file, so you haven't got used to writing components and creating lots of different components yet. You will do very, very soon. If I just flip back to the original project that I had open, and unfortunately I've shut it, my apologies. So if I open that one now, then most of you should have already got something like this on your projects. So right now I'm in the app.js file. And I think this line was written for you at the top, yeah, import React. So we're importing the necessary React files that we need to make our project run. And you've probably seen this line here on line 11. We've got class app extends component. So that's one of the ways in a React application that we can create a new component. In a React project, we can create a new component in that way. So that is what's known as a class-based component. That's one way of differentiating components. We can call them either functional-based or class-based. So classes and functions, they're just inbuilt JavaScript objects, yeah? We can use either in React. There are some differences, and we'll definitely talk about those further in the rest of the course. For now, I just want to get used to writing both types. And the first way we can do that is maybe rewrite this as a functional component, because you're now familiar with JavaScript functions as well. We've been doing that on the training platform. There's a couple on the board for the board challenge. So yeah, how would we usually write a JavaScript function? Let's say that this function is also called app, and we'll replace this class-based component in a second. So if I wanted to write a new JavaScript function called app, how would I do it? So we start with the function keyword, with the name, pass it some arguments. Let's leave it blank for now. What comes next? Curly brackets. Let's say we want to return something from this function. So we write a return statement. And if you've got lots of things you want to return in JavaScript and it goes over multiple lines, then you can actually just wrap those in brackets as well to contain everything within the one statement. The same as you do in mathematics, right? If you wanted to add something, then divide, and you wanted to be sure of the order, then you can wrap things in brackets to make sure that that all gets returned as one. So we can also return something. And one of the beautiful things about using React and using JSX as well. Does anyone know what JSX is? Maybe we should do a quick aside. So what's JSX? No idea. No idea. Okay. So it's an extension, if you like, of the JavaScript language. It enables us to write HTML-like code within JavaScript. So if you notice the top of this file, it says app.js, right? So therefore it's a JavaScript file. Everything we're writing inside of it is technically JavaScript, or will get converted into JavaScript. One of the benefits of Create React App, it allows us to write this sort of code, HTML-like code, within a JavaScript file. And it does that through an extension, if you like, to the language called JSX. Extension to the JavaScript language, yes. So JSX compiles or transpiles into JavaScript, and then the JavaScript creates our HTML, the elements within our HTML page, yeah? So this code that you've been writing, even though it looks very, very similar to HTML, is in fact JSX. And there are some subtle differences. You might have wondered why you're using class name if you've come across HTML before. It's not class name, is it? It's just what, sorry?
Is this div?
Yeah, we've still got divs, yeah, I mean, it's within a div, but div is in HTML. But if we wanted to give a div a class, we wouldn't use class name, we'd just use the word class, yeah? So that's, there you go, look, it says it's JSX, right, if I hover over it. So, yeah, in normal HTML, that would be class. As we're writing JSX, it has to be class name. Why? Well, because of this on line 17. Class already means something in JavaScript, so we need to give it a separate name. Yeah, so there are some subtle differences like that. We'll cover more in the course and as you come along, as it comes up in your projects. Yeah, there'll be things like naming events as well. Everything will be camel case. So for example, a common event in HTML is an on-click event, and you'd write it like that with a lowercase c. In JSX, it has to be camel case. It has to follow the JavaScript conventions on click with the big C, yeah? So there's going to be subtle differences like that come up. Don't worry, we'll meet them and we'll go through them. So yeah, in the okay, let's start again. So we've got some JSX here, and we wanted to instead, rather than writing a class-based component, let's write a function-based component. So at the moment, let's just check, see whether my app is running. No, so my app's not running, right, at the moment. What was the command to run your app? npm start. So I'm just going to comment out the function that we began to write. And another advantage of Create React App, it comes with its own built-in server. Yeah, so this is how we've been able to test our application and view it in the browser all the time. The server's been set up for us as well by running that Create React App command. So it's really speeded up our process. And that is, yeah, it's a local server, yeah, because it's running on localhost port 3000 by default.
If you wanted to host it on a website, so it's got its own name.
Yep.
codefish.com.
Yeah.
How would you do that?
So yeah, in task 17, I think it is we're going to deploy the app into the cloud. So we're going to deploy it to Heroku. You could deploy it to Amazon Web Services. You could deploy it to loads of different locations, right? So that will be covered later on in the course. The first step is to build it, test it locally. Once you've got a project that you're fairly happy with, then we can push it to the web and let everyone see that, yeah? Right, so anyway, yeah, so you guys have started creating something like this, yeah? You've got 2 rows, 6 images of some TV shows or movies. Some of you have maybe just got some text at the moment rather than these movies. That's fine. Yeah, I'm just trying to be at a rough location that people are at in their projects to give a similar demonstration. So that's working. Now instead, if I didn't want to return that as a class, if I wanted to return all of this JSX as a function instead, then what I can literally do is take all of that JSX code and put it inside of my return function. Let me just comment out that. So we started writing the function here. We had our return statement. Inside of that, we're going to put all of our JSX code and then obviously close our function. And then we need to make sure we have this line in there as well. We have to export default app. That was already in your code, yeah? Whether you've got a class-based component or a functional-based component, we need to export the code that we've written in app.js so that it can eventually get rendered in our, sorry, my folder structure is a little bit different, in our public index.html, yeah? We still need to render our application inside of that div. So, where were we? Back in app.js. So how's that worked? Let's just format it slightly. So we should be able to, I think it's Control-Shift-I is my shortcut. Okay. So we should now be able to go to our web page and that's still correctly displayed. Looks like it is. Yeah, and just to prove that it's not static, if I break the code and we go back, then there's a passing error, right? So you can see that we can actually write components in 2 different ways. We can write them as a JavaScript function and just return whatever we want to display inside of that function, or we can use it as a class-based component. Class app extends component, blah, blah, blah. Yeah?
So that's block of code within our function, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's JSX.
Yes, this code that looks like HTML is JSX code, yeah.
Okay, and that's an extension of JavaScript.
Yeah, and that's a sort of add-on to the JavaScript language, if you like, yeah.
Okay, so does that mean what it looks like? Does that mean that block of code can actually be written in JavaScript and it still work?
So that block of code is getting converted into JavaScript functions, very similar to create element. So
Okay, so it's converted to JavaScript before it's been rendered, or will it be rendered like this?
no, it won't be rendered like that. So there's quite a few intermediate steps. Again, that's all being handled by Create React App and Babel and Webpack. It's all getting bundled for you, and the end result you can inspect, right? The end result you can inspect on your web page, and that's how it gets rendered. Yeah. So it gets rendered inside of the root div, which was in index.html. Then we've got our app, and look, it says class now, not class name, because it's converted it to HTML. That's the only document source, document language that the browser will understand. Yeah. So it's similar, but there's subtle differences. So it's gone through a number of steps to end up in this form, but the advantage is we can just write everything in one file with a syntax as JavaScript developers that we're familiar with, and it ends up in the format we need it in the end. Yeah?
So can we go back to our function again?
We can go back to our function, indeed.
I've got a quick question.
Yep.
So earlier when Ricardo was showing us the DevTools,
Yep.
and he was showing us how to do snippets,
Mm-hmm.
he said that every time we do a function, we would need to put it inside curly braces.
Yep.
So I'm guessing for JSX, we don't need to do that.
So the reason you put it inside curly braces for DevTools is to, if you've declared a variable once, then you're not going to overwrite that variable. It's a scoping issue. So we'll talk about JavaScript scope later on. App.js has its own module. Yeah, we're importing and exporting. So anything we declare inside of app.js is naturally wrapped with curly braces or naturally scoped to app.js itself without us having to wrap it. Yeah, because it's a separate file. In DevTools, we need to wrap all that code in curly braces so that we don't mix up naming conventions, or stuff that we've already written in one snippet is not interfering with stuff in another snippet, and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's a DevTools only thing. Think of that curly braces just a DevTools only thing for now. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure how to word this one correctly, but
Mhm.
when I had previous lessons about doing JavaScript, usually all the scripts, the functions would be on a separate file,
Mhm.
which you then reference with HTML.
Yep.
Would we do the similar thing in regards to this, where we have a separate file with all the functions which we then regard that we reference, similar to like we've imported the images?
So I think based on what you're saying, you've just been working with raw HTML files, and then maybe you've got some external JavaScript files and you import them via the script tag into your HTML page. Is that what you're saying? Yep. So the way we're doing it, and because React is a component-based library, we don't need to do that. We're using import and export statements instead, which is ES6 module syntax.
Okay.
So everything just gets rendered through here, through the root. There's no need for any extra script tags because of the way we've used Create React App. That is another way you can include React in your project, via a script tag and a CDN or something, yeah? But for now, we don't need to worry about that really.
Still have the external script sheet, or will it all be internal to the app.js?
Yeah, everything comes through app.js. So if we created another component, we can just import that into app.js, and that's
Okay, so you
almost equivalent to using a script tag, right? In your case, in your example. Yeah. So get used to the import-export syntax rather than using the script tag.
Just have a question, like what he did, I just want to add to it, like, when we were in JavaScript, if we wanted a file in another project, so we could call it like, using external JavaScript. So in this, can we do that? If I want to call something from, if I want to take some code from this project in my next project.
If it's a completely different project, I'm not quite sure how you were going to transfer that across, or how you would usually transfer that across,
It's like
but
in JavaScript you have internal script, you can use external, so a file you can create. Like CSS also you have another file, so you can call that file in any of your projects.
okay, yeah, I think I see what you're saying. Yeah, we at the moment we're creating it local to the project rather than just generally on the file system. But of course, any file that you have here, like app.js or app.css, they're available on your machine locally. So there's no reason why you can't just import one of those. If you've got a style sheet that you want in another project, just do a script tag and use an absolute link to app.css in a different project, and you will still have access to that style sheet. That could get messy in the long run in terms of maintenance and stuff, but yeah, I think it's better just to recreate the file personally, so that each project is just self-contained and you're not pulling files from lots of different projects. I think that's a bit of a nightmare to maintain personally. But if that's one thing that you do and you want to continue doing, then that's up to you. You've been forewarned, but yeah. Anyway, let's try and get back on track. So that was a functional component. And yeah, we'll talk about the differences later if that's okay. Yeah, we'll talk about when to use a functional component, when to use a class-based component. Most of it has to do with state, if you've heard of using state in React. But now we can actually use state in functional-based components as well. But we'll leave that for another time. So how then, I'm just going to test you, there's a couple of board points for this one. How would we rewrite this function back into a class? What are the changes in syntax? Okay, so I think Abdul got in there first. So rather than function, we're going to go class. Yeah. What next, Abdul?
Did I see an import somewhere?
So up the top, we're already importing React, and we're importing a component from the React library. So you've got those available if you need them.
Extends.
Yeah, okay, so we're moving over to, sorry, too slow, Abdul. So extends component, yeah? Yep. What next? It's not liking line 13 because of something that's going on before.
Return.
Remove the return completely, yeah?
No, don't remove return because it has to return something.
You still need a return, definitely. Yeah, so I'm going to put it back in. But we need maybe something additionally. Do we still need these parentheses, or are they just for functions?
Well, remove it, let's see.
Remove it, let's see. It's still not fully working, but I think it's happier now. If you notice that components change color, yeah. This one is actually not part of the JavaScript language. This is a React thing next. So if we've got a class-based component and we want to display something, we need an extra method.
You put all the return stuff into a render.
You put everything you want to return inside of a render. Yeah. So with a class-based component, we also need render. And what's the syntax for that?
Render
So then we need to invoke it, yeah?
and play race everything.
And then wrap everything, as you said. Yeah, exactly. And then we stick our return statement inside. So all of our JSX code goes inside of the render and inside of our return, yeah? And then I think if I got rid of these now, I think I'm missing a close a curly brace. So I've opened one, opened two, I've only closed one, let's close the other one. I don't think I've closed my return, have I? I haven't closed my return bracket, so. Okay, something like that. So yeah, generally we start out with functional based components because they're simpler. You probably noticed it was a bit simpler to write. And then if we need some extra functionality, sometimes we might turn that into a class-based component. Yeah, so the default one you were given was a class-based one. You could have done pretty much everything with that. But sometimes if you're just exporting or importing basic information like an array, a list of shows, for example, then you might just want to create a functional component instead. They tend to be simpler. Yeah. Performance-wise, there's not much difference, to be honest, in them, so don't worry too much about that. But just write in whatever way is most familiar to you, and for most people working with JavaScript, that's functions, because we use functions all the time in our regular JavaScript code. Yeah.
What's this word, render?
Render, yeah, so that's something peculiar to React. It's just a React method, yeah? And the reason we use that is because in a class-based component, if we want to display something on the screen, we must invoke the render method. Yeah. Yeah, it's a method on its own that helps us display stuff on the screen if we've got a class, yeah? Cool, so yeah, those were the differences between functional and class-based components. And we touched briefly on JSX as well. I think all of you so far, not all of you, but most of you have looked at some images already, and you've saved some images from the web. So we've been using this import statement. Import, for example, Black Mirror from, and then we've passed this string in. And that string refers to, in my case, this Black Mirror that I'm hovering over on here. If I wanted to put all of my images inside a folder, so if I created a new folder, and I called that folder images, and maybe inside of there, I put Black Mirror, then at the moment, of course, it's now failing to compile because I've just moved that file. And I'm saying import from Black Mirror, where's Black Mirror? I can't find it. So in other words, we need to make sure that this path here is pointing to the correct location. Where would that location now be? ./images/Black Mirror. I would have said you were right. That has saved, right? Let's see if it's displaying. It might be a problem with my, no, can't resolve .images/backmirror.jpg. Okay, let's have a look again. So images is inside. Is it inside of the source? Ah, okay, yep. So yeah, that would work if, I was going to do that more complicated examples afterwards, but yeah, so the dot in our case is referring to the source folder, not always, but because app is directly inside of the source folder, and then images I'd actually put inside of front end. So yep, now it works again. So no, I did it by accident, sorry. And then if we do put it inside of a different folder perhaps, so if we yeah, so let me instead move app.js inside of common, for example, right? So now my app.js is inside of this common folder. So how would I get out of that folder?
Use a Tyndall.
Use a tilde?
Tilde, Tilde.
No, that usually refers to your home folder, the tilde. So how would I go up a level via my path? Another board point for that one. Quick Google. Anyone know, Richard? You know? how would I go up a level in my path?
Double dot.
Double dot, exactly, yep. So if I'm inside of common, to go up out of common, I'd use a double dot. And then again, I need to go inside of images and find black mirror, yeah? So this one, no such file or directory, home,
Patrick say that first.
No, I said 3 dots.
yeah, you said triple dot, yeah. So let's have a look.
Yours goes to common, doesn't it?
No, because we're inside common, so we're going outside of common and then down. And then our current error is saying home grade desktop source app.js.
No, you're going outside of source.
Yeah, the problem is I've moved it from where it's expecting to be, so. But yeah, you're quite right. If you need to go up a level, then you need to do a double dot. So for example, if I put images outside of source, not even them, yeah, I moved them into public, then I would have to change all of these to a double dot to get outside of source, and then into public, and into images.
So if you wanted to go up 2 levels, it would be double dot slash double dot.
If you wanted to go where?
Up 2 levels.
Up 2 levels, it would be double dot slash double dot, exactly. Yep, quite correct. And it doesn't even look like I can import stuff from outside of the source folder. So my example's a bit null and void, but once you get a more complicated example where you need to go up levels, yeah, it's double dot. That's all I'm trying to tell you, yeah. All right. Yeah, I guess any questions on the general file structure that we've got so far, or the basics of React? And if not, we'll move on to the React training platform that we've got, but just any questions for now on anything that we've covered?
I tried to do a break, but apparently in JSX you don't just do.
A break? What do you mean by a break? A line break?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then when I tried to do it, nothing was popping up. So I looked online and apparently you need to do an additional thing like encase it in a div. Is that correct with JSX?
Let's have a look. So you tried to do, for example, what, here or something? Let's.
When it was just the names, but yeah.
Yeah, with images it's not going to be as easy, but you tried to do something like that, right?
Yeah. So it's, yeah.
And if you put it inside of a div, it worked.
That's what Google says.
Have you tried it yet?
No, so I found out I was actually going the wrong way of doing things.
Does it complain?
Do the same for new line.
New line? What sort of new line?
Like if you just write in, so like, I have a cat.
I like your example.
Drop it down to the next level, next underneath.
No, I mean that's why we've got CSS, right? We use CSS to lay out our code. We don't really nowadays use things like line breaks or stuff like that, right? We can do all that stuff with CSS in general. Has this done anything? No, because Flex is overriding it, right? If we had a basic text node, for example, I can stick one in quickly. So if on, let's say we got one right at the top, yeah, and let's say we had a paragraph. What was your example, Ewan? I have a cat, right? And then we might want a line break, and then someone else might say, I had. Oh, that's sad. I'm going to do present tense. Yeah, so we might try something like that, yeah?
Yeah.
I have a cat, and then try and do a line break, and then I have a dog afterwards. Will that do anything? Let's have a look. Yeah, that works.
So it's working because it's encased.
Oh, it's working because well, not encased in a div, it's encased in a paragraph.
But it's still encased in text. So if
Well, it's got to be encased in something. You've got to encase your text in something. So your div is your outer level
The label.
element. So
so if you close the P,
if I close the P,
it's,
yeah, like,
I close the P tag after I have a cat.
oh, if you close the P tag after I have a cat, okay, I understand.
And then just see if it will work.
Why would you not run icon?
So you've got a paragraph, and then you've just got some floating text here inside of the app. Yeah, weird, but then it does it like that because the paragraph's a separate element with its own styling, and then the next element has the text.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd have to have a look maybe at your specific example if it wasn't working and see why, but generally, yeah, I think you can still use line breaks like that in React. Of course, yeah, inside the same element makes more sense. Because if it's a separate element anyway, then often if they're block elements, then they're going to go onto a new line. Cool. Anything else about React?
So if I were to write a new component apart from the app component now,
Yep.
right?
Okay, yeah, very quickly we can do a new component. So new
Which I can write as a function as well.
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
would that go to?
It depends what it relates to, but let's say we just want to keep it in the same folder as app.js. For example, you will probably at some point have to create a gallery component. And maybe a details component, things like this, further on in your project. So you could do that just by creating a new file. Give it a capital. We always want to capitalize our components. Unfortunately, I created that the wrong place, but I'll just move it across. So now we've got a gallery JavaScript file, or we could call it a gallery component. So if I wanted a functional component, I'd do the same. Function, gallery, pass it any arguments if it needs them, return something. For now, yeah, I'm just going to return a paragraph with a bit of text in.
I have a cat.
And I am a list of, or I am a gallery of cats, right? I am a gallery of cats, or cat pictures. Everyone loves a good cat picture. I'm a gallery of cat pictures, yeah? So that component, as it's written, that function as it's written, will just return a paragraph with a bit of text inside
All right.
saying I'm a gallery of cat pictures.
Okay.
Then if we want to, huh?
That will have to be imported to the.
Yeah, exactly. Then if we want to use it in a different component,
Yeah.
we have to do export. I'm going to use default because there's only one of them. Export default gallery. Yeah, the name of the component. We'll definitely do this stuff later, by the way, again, guys, like importing and exporting components and using state. But just as you asked, well, I thought I'd do it quickly. So we've exported our gallery component. And then if we've exported it, we want to import it, right? So I'll just drop it down here. Import gallery from, and it's in the same folder. So we use // same folder. And it's actually listed there for me, right? Gallery, it's recognized it. We don't need the .js because by default it appends a .js there, okay? And then it's this weird sort of grayed out color. Now what does that mean?
It's unused.
It's unused, exactly. So we've imported it, but why have you imported it? Because you haven't used it. So at the moment it's redundant. If, however, we get rid of this paragraph and we instead display our gallery component. One more board challenge point. Does anyone know how to display a component within another component? It's a very simple syntax. You could give it its separate div. Let's say I just want to chuck it in there as it is. no, I'll tell you. I'll just finish writing. Yep.
Do it kind of in the first.
You do it like a div tag. So you just create, it's now got its own custom tag. And we can just type gallery. And if I did it as a normal tag, it would close it like that for me. And that has now rendered our gallery component inside of app.js. Let's just double check that. Obviously, I could be lying, right? Oh, and failed to compile. Yeah, that's a very good point. So I made a very silly, simple mistake there. You will probably make as well before you get used to working in React. So we just said, oh yeah, let's create a a JavaScript function. But we actually wanted to create a React component. So if we're working within the React ecosystem, on the top of every file that we want to be in a React project, we need to import React. Exactly, yeah. So import, I always forget the syntax. It's import capital React, yeah. Capital React from, and then React like that. So now that we've done that, we should no longer see that error. There we go. And at the top of my whole app now, I'm a gallery of cat pictures. Yeah, obviously not. It's just funny looking cats, especially this guy. But that was all made possible by writing it in a totally separate file, exporting it, and then importing it in using that statement, and then simply giving it its own tag, its own custom tag, and that renders the component.
Can I just add to that? Where would that be useful?
Where? Everywhere. You will use this constantly. So this is now moving into the component-based architecture or component-based way of designing apps. So rather than having, look, already this file's getting, 50 lines or something, we don't want files that are very, very big. Because if we have thousands of lines of code in one file and something breaks within that file, it can be a lot harder to find out where that error is. Here, I've got a tiny little component. If something goes wrong in gallery, chances are it's in like 3 lines. Yeah, it's a lot easier to find and to fix. So we're going to create lots and lots of components throughout the course of this course, through the duration of this course, and yeah, you will just find that it makes it a lot easier to edit and reuse your code as well. Let's say this in fact was an image, and I didn't want one of them, but I wanted 6 of them. Okay, let's say 3 because I'm not going to type it all the time. If we wanted 3 of them, well, let's just have 3 galleries, right? It doesn't make sense in terms of what it is, but these are going to be called paragraphs instead. But now, if I go back, I'm a gallery cat pictures, I'm a gallery cat pictures, yeah? So we've just reused that code 3 times, really, really simply. Yeah, so we've just got one little component that does all the logic and the presentation for us, and we can reuse it all over our code base by importing, exporting, making slight changes. We'll talk about props and state and how we pass different data to the components as well. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's one of the huge reasons why we use something like React, is because we can easily create these small components and small modules and import them and export them all over our code and pass data between them, and it just ends up being a lot neater, right? What's neater in your app? Having a gallery like that, or having all of this code, blah 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 blah, that doesn't change? Yeah, just having a component name, and then if you want to find out what is in that code, well, let's just go to gallery and check that. So
yeah, if you were going to like a website where it took you to some secure page for payment details or something, that would be a separate component.
Separate component, yeah, payment component. Yeah, even within that page itself, if you've got a form, you might have email part of form as one component, and then another with all the error checking and validation in it. Yep, so just you're breaking everything up into components, and it's a very popular way of designing now. Yeah, component-based design or component-based architecture.
Is the code fix or everything going to be like one of the tasks going forward turning into a component-based one?
Yeah, I can't remember which number now, but I think even within the first 10, you're creating a new gallery component, a new details component, And then you refactor your code so that it's just neater and easier to read, so that rather than having one big file, you're going to have lots of little small components that are easier to maintain and update. So yeah, absolutely, you'll be doing that very, very soon. Maybe not this week, but certainly next week you'll get into that, I imagine. Yeah. Cool. This video's gone on quite a long time already, but yeah, why not? Let's just keep rolling. And I just want to show you the React training on the platform briefly for those that haven't viewed it yet. Any more questions before I move on? No? All good for now. Yeah, we'll revisit all the stuff that we need, but it's hard to keep it small and condensed, right, when it's the intro. Yeah, I know, we've gone on a bit long, right, but hey. So let me shut all that. And yeah, so if you don't remember how to get to it, you can all go on your own laptops as well now if you want. So you can click on training, click on React. We'll start on beginner for now. And you're listed with 5 topics at the moment. So I'm just going to start on the first one. Why not? Render. Remember that render method within the class-based components? So essentially what we want to display on the screen, what we want to render. So I'm going to play that test, and I haven't got the fancy zoom, so instead I have to do just some weird things, and hopefully you can still see that. So on the left-hand side, this looks a little bit different to what you're used to on the JavaScript platform. Yeah, the JavaScript training was perhaps a little bit easier to read. It was just a function invocation, and then it had a triple equals sign and what we wanted to return. Yeah, that was the format for the JavaScript training. This one instead is written in test syntax. So this is a test. IT, yeah, this is a test. Mostly this is jest syntax, so if you need to know more, then you can type jest. So this is a way to test components. Yeah, so it's a framework for testing components. In particular, React components. That's what it's designed for. So we've actually written the left-hand side as a test. So then you get exposure to testing and writing tests, or at least reading tests in this case. I have to talk to Ricardo whether it's a requirement of this course, but certainly in the future it will be a requirement to actually write your own tests as well. I think probably not for you guys because we didn't mention it on day one, right? So it's not really fair. But it'd be a good thing to practice anyway, to practice writing your own tests. And we'll have some workshops about this in the future as well. Test-driven development, unit tests, how to write tests, the syntax and everything. But just to answer this question, we have to have a basic understanding of the test. So just know that IT stands for test. And if you notice, it's actually a function itself, right? It's wrapped in brackets. And the first argument here is just a description of the test itself. So what do we want to test? Well, we want to test whether welcome displays a welcome message. So we're testing that welcome, the welcome component in this case, yeah, the welcome function, the welcome component displays a welcome message. Second argument is a function. Given, when, then. You often hear that in testing as well. So the when is just our setup. So when we say that the variable welcome is equal to the component, then we expect this result down here. So this is the key line, right? On most of these beginner tests, this is the key line. We expect the text inside of the welcome component to be or to equal welcome to React. Simple as that. That's what it's saying. Yeah, sorry, can you all read that? I can't really zoom anymore, otherwise my layout goes a bit weird. Yeah, just watch it on YouTube if you can't see it, if it's a bit small. So where do you think then we need to write that welcome to React message? In the return, and yeah, you're right, inside the div, yeah? Because within certain HTML elements, which a div is one, then you can just write text. It creates a text node for you. So if we put, oh no, we don't put gallery in there. It's from the old bit of code that we just had. If we instead put welcome to React inside of that, do we do it as a string or not?
It doesn't matter.
Does it matter? We're not sure, so let me run it. So this is as a string. Ooh, no, hang on. So it says if you want to include a quote, that can be escaped with certain characters. So in other words, anything that we put between a div is automatically determined to be text. So us trying to put these weird quotes in, it doesn't understand it. It's not JavaScript. We're not saying pass a JavaScript string in here. This is JSX or very similar to HTML, right? So you would just write any text without the quotes, the same way as we did in the application, right? Oh, I've got rid of it now, but the same way as we did here. I didn't put that in a quote, did I? I didn't say I'm a gallery of pictures quote. Just doesn't make sense inside a HTML element, so you do not need those quotations. So now that I've taken them out, will it work if I also put a semicolon?
No, no,
No?
no.
Oh, it does. Confetti time.
Oh, it's a function, isn't it?
It's a function, yeah. So in this case, it's a React component, yeah. It's a functional based React component, like what we rewrote today, and like we had just returning that paragraph. It's a functional based React component, capitalized, yeah. And we just wanted that component, the text inside of it, to equal welcome to React. And that's all we did. We wrote welcome to React inside of the div, therefore it's automatically text. And that's it really, yeah, that's all we did for that one. Any questions on that? Or we'll do one more and I'll get you to give me a bit of feedback and see if you can solve the next one. Yeah, alright, I'll move on. Okay, so now get a welcome message in 2 paragraphs. So think of all of these initial lines as just your setup. We're creating a test, we're giving it a description, set up our component, told our test how to find our paragraphs, and then what do we expect? Well, we expect welcome.find paragraphs to have 2 of them, to have a length of 2. We expect the first paragraph's text, notice the index 0, to equal welcome, just welcome on its own. And then we expect the second paragraph's text to equal equal to React. Yeah? So that's what our test is saying. How would I write that? Second P tag, that sounds like a good start, right? Because that first test was expect welcome, find the paragraphs to have a length of 2. And I can only see 1 at the moment. So yeah, let's create a second one. I think that's a really good start. So if I ran that test now, where would the test fail? So we've got 3 conditions. We expect paragraphs to be 2. Would that pass? Yeah. Expect paragraph 0 text to be welcome. Would that pass?
Yeah.
So it's going to fail on that line, right? So if I ran it now, you see what's highlighted in red? It's that 3rd bit there. So in other words, that was okay, but this 3rd expectation was not okay. How do we fix it? Change it to React. And then if we run it again, passed again. Confetti time.
So what we're writing in the right-hand side,
Yeah.
that would be JSX in React.
Yep. So think of on the right-hand side, you have to now write the React component rather than writing the JavaScript function. That's the only difference. And the left-hand side is different. It's a test rather than well, there was a test before, to be honest, but it was an equality test, right? But this is actually written in test syntax, in jest syntax. So people find it often quite hard to interpret the left-hand side. What does it mean? What is expected of me? So you'll find that gradually throughout the course, you'll get used to what is expected of you, and hopefully you'll be able to, towards the end, maybe even have a go at writing a test or two of your own. Because that's what you generally do in development. You'd write the test first, and then you would write the function to pass that test. Yeah, that's the approach of test-driven development. I'll show you one more, and someone can try and explain the left-hand side to me. Yeah, let's go. Okay, so what do you think is expected in this case? I can incentivize you by board challenge points again. So we've already had Abdul had a good go, Nilofa had a good go, and Richard had a good go in the React stuff. So what are we expecting? Anyone tell me? We're expecting some text to equal Michael Jordan, yeah. But so okay, we've already got Michael and Jordan then. So have we solved it for you, or have you got to do something else? We want two arguments in the function. So you're saying, do we put what would go up there?
We would have first name and last name.
You mean similar to the last one, really?
No, Aeneas is actually saying pass in some arguments to the function, but do you agree with that?
We could have a class and a div.
Yeah. So I like that second suggestion a lot better. We could have a class in the div. Notice down here, what element are we trying to find? We're trying to find dot first name. Now in CSS, dot first name would be the first name class, yeah? So just uses a similar syntax. If we wanted to find a class within our document, within our component, we would use dot first name. If we wanted to find an ID, we would use hash or hashtag first name, yeah? So how am I going to write this then? So you said inside of the div, so let's have a look at the Michael one. What would go in there?
So
Class or class name?
class would be enough.
Class name.
So
Class name is JSX, isn't it?
yeah, imagine this is a React. We're in React at the moment, and we're writing what? HTML or JSX?
JSX.
We're writing JSX. So when we write JSX, do we use class or class name? Class name, yeah. So it must be class name. And then equals,
First name.
just like that.
No,
No, we need.
Yep, just checking. Oh, yep, that's not the right symbol anyway, but like that, yeah. Okay. Good. And anything else to solve the whole question?
last name.
Yep, so the same again, but for last name, yeah? So another div, class name equals, whoops, that's our chatbot popping up. Last name, try that one. And there we go. I was lazy with the semicolon again. After your return statement, give it a semicolon. But apart from that, very good. I'm not going to go any further in case you get lots of render questions come up on Thursday, and I've solved the first 3 for you there. But that would be good revision maybe to watch the last 10-15 minutes of this video just to see how we solved some of those problems, yeah? Please have a play around on the platform before Thursday, and yeah, not Thursday, Friday now, isn't it? We've moved it to Friday, excuse me, yeah. And yeah, obviously, good luck for them. Any other questions? Or we will stop it there. Okay?
Just one.
Yeah, you
last-
go, Abdul, yeah.
Just one last.
Uh-huh.
Right. We've seen what do you call it? We've seen GSX.
Yeah, yeah.
We've seen React
Yeah.
as a library.
Yeah.
Where does our JavaScript knowledge plug into all of this?
Okay, yeah, I mean, we didn't really touch on that, but what you can do, I think I'm going to stop the video there anyway, and then I'll just explain off video, because we'll go over this again.